Last year's Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time, was an action-adventure in the truest sense of the term, offering awesome levels, fiendish puzzles, and of course, the acrobatic prince himself. Ubisoft has just released a sequel, Warrior Within, and it appears to have addressed the biggest complaints about the previous game by adding in a deeper combat engine and a lengthier campaign. While these are great improvements, the darker tone falls somewhat flat compared to the charming fairy tale atmosphere in The Sands of Time. But make no mistake, Warrior Within is still a very worthy sequel to last year's game. Warrior Within continues the prince's story from last year's game. Because the prince has unleashed the mystical Sands of Time, he finds himself chased relentlessly by a monster called the Dahaka. To escape this fix, the prince decides he must travel to the past and kill the Empress of Time in order to prevent the creation of the sands entirely. Sound like a conundrum to you? Well, if you can accept Back to the Future, you shouldn't have any trouble suspending your disbelief for the plot of Prince of Persia: Warrior Within. The game borrows a page from Zelda: A Link to the Past, in that you'll be exploring in the same areas in 2 different time periods. Special rooms scattered throughout the fortress allow you to shift back and forth between the past and the present. Areas of the castle will change accordingly depending on the time period. This back and forth time travel lengthens the game, but also means you'll be doing a little bit of backtracking. It isn't as pronounced as a game like Metroid, but for the most part, the Warrior Within still plays in a linear way. The good news is that the game's pretty long, about 15 or 20 hours. While the middle of the game feels like it drags a bit, there's an interesting plot twist toward the end that freshens the gameplay up and helps you keep going until the very end. The biggest new addition to the game is a deeper combat mechanic. The prince can now do dozens of different weapon combos. With a single weapon in hand, you can grab enemies and throw them, or even strangle them. Dual wielding takes away your throw options, but allows you to perform much more powerful weapon combos. You can also choose to throw the weapon in your offhand at enemies to impale or behead them. You can of course still vault off of enemies and walls for more powerful slashing attacks, and a new pole swinging attack has been added. There's also plenty of blood and gore in Warrior Within to further spice things up. With all these new moves available, you can imagine that there's a lot more combat in Warrior Within than in The Sands of Time. Enemies will come at you several at a time, and you'll need to become proficient with your moves in order to survive. There are also a few boss fights in the game, but unfortunately there's quite a bit of recycling that's been done, so these aren't quite as memorable as they could have been. Despite the addition of the new combat engine, the real strength of Warrior Within, as in last year's game, is in the environmental puzzles. As the prince, you'll need to jump, wall run, climb, swing, and vault your way from ledge to ledge and branch to branch. You can also make controlled falls by stabbing into tapestries and sliding straight down. Completing the fiendish puzzles and navigating your way through each room is extremely fun and satisfying, and it's made all the more enjoyable by the well-animated moves of the prince and the beautifully designed levels. Several times throughout the game, you'll meet up with the mystical Dahaka. This kicks off an intense chase scene where you must navigate several sets of hazards very quickly lest the Dahaka catch you. These sequences offer a nice change of pace and add to the game greatly. The biggest disappointment with Warrior Within actually has nothing to do with the technical gameplay itself. The game's taken on a much darker tone. The new prince is no longer the dignified, self-deprecating nobleman he was in The Sands of Time. Instead, he comes off as an arrogant brute, yelling out conceited taunts during combat.
Is that the best you have to offer?
All in all, it makes the prince a lot less likable. The charming fairy tale tone of The Sands of Time has given way to a game that feels like it's trying just a little too hard to be edgy. Still, Prince of Persia: Warrior Within is an excellent game in its own right. Those who enjoy navigating through beautifully designed levels, complete with clever puzzles and traps, will definitely get their money's worth, and the combat has improved greatly. For those reasons, Prince of Persia: Warrior Within is easy to recommend for any action-adventure fan.